2, 3, okay, 4. I worked at a 7-Eleven for 4 years when I was going through high school, kind of paid the bills. I drank a lot of Slurpees, sold a lot of Slurpees. And for me, that was, it was an okay job. But one of the things I remember about working in the 7-Eleven is that we didn't measure our success by how many products we put on the shelf. We didn't measure our success by how many hours the staff worked. We didn't measure our success by how much Slurpee we stocked. How do you think we measured our success as a store? Any thoughts? How much we sold, how much money we made, right? A profit. That was what we looked for. My argument is that the same is true for nonprofits and philanthropy, working with young people. But that so often we get stuck in the rut of measuring how many products we put on the shelf or how many hours our staff worked, i.e., in other words, how many volunteer hours we've done. We measure our success by how many children we served, by how many activities we put on. That's important information. That's good audit information. It tells us about our process and our implementation. What it doesn't tell us is about our success. We're looking for a profit too. It's a social profit. It's a more complicated profit. And it comes in the form of transformation, community transformation, life transformation. That's what we're aiming for. And I would say, secondly, we're not just looking for any impacts. And those that are often measuring outcomes, when they do look for these outcomes, these effects, we get stuck in the idea of looking for negative outcomes. So how many times did the young people recidivate? What's the rate of drug use? What's the rate of teenage pregnancy? And so on and so on. But how many of you, let's all try to remember the day that we were born. We won't remember too much. Actually, we'll just fast forward to the part where our parents are holding us in their arms, right? And you're in a nice quilt or something, and mom or dad looks down at you. How many of you think the first thing that came out of mom and dad's mouth was, man, I just hope she doesn't end up in jail? Or, gosh, I just hope she doesn't do methamphetamine. You know, it's probably not. Probably your parents looked into your eyes and thought of all of the incredible potential that you had. Probably thought of all the things that you would do, about the happiness that they dreamt for you, about your growth, and about the incredible world before you and your potential. Why don't we then look at all young people that way when we're working in nonprofits and foundations? Why then do we look at measuring our success by negative indicators without looking at positive indicators? And it doesn't always happen. But in terms of positive youth development, that first word, positive, it suggests that we're looking to develop the strengths and the assets of young people. So I suggest, as much of the evidence now does, that we move towards looking at these positive indicators for young people. And we start to rebuild our success, or our trajectory, our strategies around these positive outcomes for young people. And in theory and in evidence, if we increase young people's positive outcomes like self-esteem, abilities in school and so forth, mental well-being, happiness, then the rest of the things will come along with it. As you improve young person's self-efficacy and engagement in the community, recidivism goes down. So we get our cake and eat it too. And that's what I think that we should start looking for. And it's very important that we're looking for these impacts, because otherwise, if we're just stuck in the outputs, then we get stuck in this process. And then we get tied to thinking about the process as the most important thing, or the outputs that we're putting into it. Just a short example on that, when I went to Uganda, I got to do a youth adult partnerships training for a youth corps home in inner city Kampala, which is the capital city of Uganda. And I was kind of nervous. I didn't really want to. I didn't know how I was going to do this. I'd never done a youth development training in Africa in particular, and I didn't know how it was going to go. So I spent the whole day before getting it prepared, doing the paperwork, doing flip chart paper, getting markers, all kinds of stuff. Had it down to the T. And then I get there the next morning into this youth corps home, and there are young people that are from the streets, and then there's adults that work with them. And the first thing I usually do in a training is I pass around a toy. In this case, it was a little squeaky gorilla named Manolo, and he stuck his tongue out and made a loud noise when you squeezed him. And so we passed this gorilla around just to get their names and introduce. And the thing was that they couldn't get their minds off this stupid monkey. And so we kept trying to move forward in this positive youth development training that I had done such a quote-unquote professional job on and was so, I think, so in tune with. And these young people couldn't get their mind off the monkey. So finally, I put all the papers down, and I pulled out of my backpack a deck of cards, a Frisbee, the monkey, and then I turned on the radio, and we spent the rest of the night doing nothing but dancing, playing, having fun, laughing. I'm not saying positive youth development training isn't important. I think it was important, and I think at some time it would have been important. But in that moment, what those young people needed was to laugh. They needed to play. They needed to be kids. And the adults who lived serious lives as well, these children had serious lives because they're coming off the streets, and these adults have serious lives because they're constantly taking the burden and supporting these young people that are coming off the streets. They needed a day to be able to just humanize themselves, to be able to laugh and play. When we're looking for transformation, when we're looking for the impacts and not just the process or not just the outputs, then we have that flexibility to act in that way. And then I would say, especially in terms of when we're talking about youth, a lot of what young people are going through is this struggle of passion and pain. And many young people are dealing with this pain. Again, another example from Uganda. When I went to a Cornerstone Leadership Academy, a leadership academy in the rural villages, the executive director asked me to give a talk for these youth on the idea of pain and passion, or turning your pain into something of strength. And I thought that was a ridiculous ask, frankly. I'd gone through some struggles, but I'd never had to go a week without eating. I'd never had to kill my own family. This is in a country where 50,000 children were forced to be either child soldiers or sex slaves as young as 7 or 8 years old, because that's when they were cheapest and that's when they were easiest to manipulate. And these were young people who were brought out into this leadership academy, and that they were brought together. And a lot of these young people whose lives were transformed in this experience. And I thought, who am I to talk about pain before these kids? But finally, they convinced me, and so I gave a talk, kind of like what we're doing today, talking to them about my experiences and how people lifted me up and played an important role in my life. And afterwards, when I was done talking, a young man, age 15, I think at the time, named Paul, stood up and he started to cry. And he said, what you said was so important for me. He says, when I first came to this leadership academy, all I could think was that I never would want my kids to ever know the troubles, to know the struggles that I've had to deal with. He says, now I know that's not possible. All I can do is love them enough to know what to do with that pain when it comes. And I thought that was so much more profound than I had taken it. Such an incredible statement. And Paul now 17, 18, is doing incredible things. I just got to hang out with him again a few weeks ago. And his story is shortly that his mom and dad had both died of HIV/AIDS. They're in one of the poorest areas of West Uganda where HIV/AIDS are rampant. And so he is getting together with a group of young people from their community to start up a youth leadership and education initiative to tackle the HIV/AIDS epidemic in their community. This was a young person who's not getting a lot of international support. It's a young person who brought other young people together because he believed in himself and the cause. And to me, that was a very powerful statement, powerful move forward. A man named Viktor Frankl wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning. And in this book, he quotes Nietzsche. And the quote is, if there is to be meaning in life at all, there must be meaning in suffering. If there's meaning in life at all, there must be meaning in suffering. So this is important because if we're going to be reaching out to young people, all young people deal with struggles and pain, especially in adolescence, tough years, but especially with young people who maybe are those who are the harder to reach out to, say youth in foster care, juvenile justice, or runaway and homeless youth, or youth who are just dealing with the hard times. This is something we need to be able to provide to them. We owe it to them to give meaning to their struggles. We owe it to them to give dignity to their value, to their gifts, to their life. And I think we can do that through empowerment. I think philanthropy can play a very important role in that. So I'm going to close on just one poem. It's provided by a young woman in Rwanda. Her name is Natalina, and her poem, she was 15 or 16 when she wrote this. She was really excited I was going to share this. And it says, "Who will speak if you do not?" It's the title. It says, "They were once in dust, but now in chairs. Once voiceless, but now too loud. Once given the power, they forgot. The grassroots. We always give, yet we cannot receive. Why? A summon, my comrades. Stand up and take your ground. Let the poor be heard through you. Speak for the voiceless, the children of use, so that they may be heard. If not you, then who will speak? They have ears, yet they cannot hear, have feelings, but cannot feel, with eyes wide open, yet they are blind. That is why I say, who will speak if you do not? So I want to open it up to questions. You can ask anything you want, youth empowerment, working with the European Union. You can ask on that. We're working on impacts in development, or the look on their face when they realize they hired an American. You can ask about when I got bit by a spider monkey named Vicky, whatever you want to, it's open. But just want to thank you, and again, the Center on Philanthropy and Indiana Campus Compact for making this platform possible.
My question is, where do you want to go from here? What is your biggest goal in your life, and how are you going to reach that?
It's a big question. So my biggest goal now, I think I tend to, maybe this speaks to my generation, maybe a lot of you can identify with this. I think a lot of people before us thought in terms of careers. I want to be this when I grow up. I don't really think that way. I think more about my passions and projects I'm excited about, and whether it's working for a foundation or working for a nonprofit or being in government, it doesn't matter as long as I can have fun doing it and I get a lot of flexibility to work on what I want to work on. And so the things that I'm most impassioned by are the idea of right now of really looking at empowerment at a community level, particularly with youth and children, and then how we can move this movement forward. So a group of friends and I are starting. I've put the website up here, the youthfactor.org. We're just starting an organization called Youth Factor. It's brand new. It actually won't launch for another 2 months. Even this website's just a preliminary website until we do a spiffier, cooler one. But youthfactor.org, the idea is to take all of these small projects that we've worked on starting. I've probably been involved with starting about 9 or 10 grassroots youth programs now around the world. And that's really cool in a lot of ways. But these programs are struggling in some other ways with sustainability, with financial viability, with keeping the youth empowerment momentum strong and their adult staff trained and the youth leadership developed as they move forward in youth transition, as we know, in and out. So we're starting up this small venture philanthropy, for those of you who might know that term, which is the idea of taking a small philanthropic initiative and to provide seed funding for grassroots youth programs. But you don't just provide funding, you also provide very tailored relational supports, and you set up a couple of goals with each of those projects. So maybe it's for Guatemala, one of the things they're really excited about right now is they've got a great program model, but a lot of young people that are coming out with great leadership skills, they're not able to go into university because they can't afford it. So it could be providing scholarships for some of these young people then to go into university or institutions of higher ed. It could be for a program in Florida to set up a better system for evaluating its outcomes. It could be for a group in Uganda to establish a new youth corps home in Sudan. The opportunities are endless, and that's what we like about it. So to take those, the things that they're working on that they need some help with, that they could use a partnership with. We don't like to call ourselves consultants, but we have a really terrific group of young professionals from around the world, most of them in their 20s, a couple in their teens, and they've got a lot of skills from finance to web design to community development. And we've got this board, and they're going to be setting up these investment teams to partner with these different grassroots programs. So that, and then working with existing philanthropy. I just got a call from the Gates Foundation last week. As you know, they're now just moving up with the William Buffett grant, or the gift. They're going to $70 billion. They'll be the largest foundation in the world. So they're starting to strategize. And part of that strategy is asking how they can integrate youth in their process. And so that's something I'll be working with them as well.